Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Part 232 based on novel. So let's start. Beast God, why are you venting your rage on others? Come at me if I am the one you're looking for. Yu Hao will be here waiting for you. A bright voice suddenly rang in the sky without any warning. Even though this voice did not appear to be particularly loud, the entire battlefield, including the Sun Moon Empire's troops, which were camped 50 kilometers away from Shrek City, could hear his words clearly. Yu Hao. The same words entered everyone's ears, but different people reacted to this differently. Elder Xian's eyes suddenly lit up just when he was starting to lose hope. He immediately doused the flames on his body, which were burning his soul power, as the Dao Tai behind his back vanished. After regaining his godly Dao Tai bull martial soul, he was no longer that affected by Dien. Even though it was the same name, it induced a different emotion within Juzi. Now she knew that Dien had intruded into Shrek City to find Yu Hao. This also confirmed her suspicion that Yu Hao was really in Shrek City. At this instant, she was overwhelmed by several emotions as her mind turned completely blank after hearing Yu Hao's voice. A jade green light flashed as a figure soared up into the sky from within Shrek City. In the blink of an eye, the jade green figure was able to reach an incredibly high altitude. The powerful pressure released by Dien's body did not seem to work on him. The image flickered as the jade green light stopped next to Elder Xian. This person was none other than Yu Hao. Yu Hao was now wearing the Icy War God's armor. However, his body was radiating a jade blue glow underneath the armor. Elder Xian could immediately sense the reduction in the surrounding pressure the moment Yu Hao moved closer to him. The pressure acting on him was essentially halved by his presence. Elder Xian was surprised to see Yu Hao next to him. He whispered, "Did you succeed?" "Yes." Yu Hao nodded. Elder Xian laughed and said, "That's great. That's great. Dien, weren't you looking for Yu Hao? Yu Hao is now here." Dien's expression changed as he stared at Yu Hao. He was startled to find himself no longer able to see through the young man before him. He could not tell what cultivation Yu Hao had attained. "Dien, how have you been? I have something I want to return to you. I want to thank you for protecting me for all these years." As he spoke, Yu Hao's wrist shook as a grey light surged towards Dien. Dien waved his right hand in the air as his aura weakened a little bit. He did not need to see what he had caught to know what exactly was in his palm. It was the Black Dragon's reverse scale which he had given to Yu Hao previously to seal and monitor him. He was actually able to remove the reverse scale from his body. This means that his power must have reached the heights of mine momentarily to even be able to remove my scale. Ultimate Dolor? No, that's impossible. He was still a Soul Dolor who was unable to attain the title Dolor rank not too long ago. How could he become an Ultimate Dolor in such a short amount of time? The same questions formed in Juzi's mind as she watched from afar. She had already known how powerful Yu Hao had become the last time she saw him at the palace in Radiant City. However, he was definitely not this strong. When did he develop the ability to stand unfazed before a battle between an ultimate Dolor and the strongest individual in the world? It seemed like the beast god had also become a little nervous after he had appeared. There was a calm expression on Yu Hao's face as he stared at the beast god and expressed his respects. "You actually managed to break free from my reverse scale. If I do not guess wrongly, there can only be one explanation." The beast god was able to speak calmly after recovering from his momentary shock. Yu Hao lifted the visor on his armor as he flashed a smile. "Beast god, do you dare to fight me?" "What?" After hearing his words, everyone, including the people from Shrek Academy and the Sun Moon Empire, was shocked beyond belief. There were many people who knew Yu Hao, and they could not believe their ears when they heard him challenging the beast god, the strongest individual in the world, to a fight. How old is he? How much power does he actually possess? What is he banking on to beat the beast god? Isn't he just seeking his own death? What surprised them even more was how the beast god actually nodded in approval. Dien pointed his dark dragon sword at Yu Hao and said, "Sure. Let me see what you have learned and understood." Yu Hao's pupils lit up after hearing Dien's response. One of his pupils was completely golden, while the other one radiated a jade blue glow. At this instant, he was brimming with confidence. Even he himself did not know how strong he had become. Yes, he had succeeded. With the help of his companions and Elder Mu, he had finally succeeded. Ice Spirit Fusion. Boom! As the Snow Empress intent entered Yu Hao's heart, he felt as if he was blown into a million pieces by the insane amount of energy. At that instant, he was completely unable to sense his own soul cores and body. Everything seemed to have turned blank. This sensation lasted for an unknown amount of time before he slowly regained his senses. An extremely familiar energy was enveloping his spiritual soul core, which had many tiny cracks around it. It was the presence of this energy that prevented it from shattering. Right now, his spiritual soul core was repairing itself at an insane rate. Waves of mystical energy were being released constantly from his body. When Yu Hao took a closer look at his body, he realized that it had completely transformed. A crystal-clear white soul core was rotating quietly at his chest. Its size was slightly bigger than the spiritual soul core. There seemed to be a human figure flickering within it. This is the Snow Empress? Yu Hao was able to recognize the figure in his soul core instantly. The figure was none other than the Snow Empress. The Ice Jade Empress Scorpion's torso bone was no longer glowing. At this instant, his bones had turned a brilliant golden color after being nourished by the dragon pill. The Ice Empress aura had become so weak that he could barely sense it. Yu Hao had no idea what had happened. But at this instant, he realized he was no longer able to communicate with the Snow Empress, the Ice Empress, Little Bai, and the rest. Even Li Wei had fallen into a deep slumber. Sky Dream? Yu Hao was finally, fully awake. He recognized the mystical energy which was encircling his spiritual soul core. It belonged to the Sky Dream Ice Worm. Yu Hao's exclamation seemed to have awakened the Sky Dream Ice Worm. However, Sky Dream did not seem to be able to respond. The mystical energy simply disappeared as the Sky Dream Ice Worm transformed into a streak of light which vanished in his spiritual sea. Now, he had lost all contact with his 6 spirits. He finally had 2 soul cores. His spiritual soul core was bright golden, while the ultimate ice soul core at his chest was white. The 2 soul cores were now rotating in opposite directions. The energy they were releasing was fusing at a point that lay between them. That point was where all of Yu Hao's power began. Tiny spirals, which were formed after the power released by the 2 soul cores had collided, flowed into the passageways within his body. This pure compressed soul power and spiritual power was healing Yu Hao's broken body at an incredible speed. The Life Guardian sword was also naturally nourishing Yu Hao's body with the dense life energy it was radiating. It was almost as if Yu Hao was getting a brand new body. The memory flashed across his mind for an instant before vanishing. To be honest, even Yu Hao did not know how he had managed to succeed. His 6 spirits were now all asleep, and were unable to answer any of his queries. He just knew that he had somehow managed to succeed. He believed that his 6 spirits must have paid a hefty price to assist him. After his body had completely recovered, he noticed the black dragon's reverse scale on the floor. Immediately, he sensed that the beast god was high up in the sky above him. Hence, he left the room and came to where they were to face the beast god. And at this moment, he did not fear Dien. Yu Hao's figure flickered and disappeared from Elder Xian's side. When his body flickered again, he was already a few kilometers away from the parameters of Shrek City. Dien let out a cold grunt as he took a huge stride in the air and appeared in front of Yu Hao. As he lifted the dark dragon sword in his hand, the sky started to darken. It was as if the entire intent of heaven and earth was in his control as he smashed the power of the natural elements into Yu Hao. Yu Hao pressed the visor down onto his face as the icy war god's armor released a bright jade blue glow. Following which, a short dagger appeared in his hand. Yu Hao immediately raised his arm as a 4-foot-long blue light appeared on the blade of the dagger. In addition, there seemed to be a layer of thin mist surrounding the blade. The surrounding air seemed to come to a standstill as extreme cold permeated throughout the air. Even the Sun Moon Empire soldiers, which were a long way from the battle, could sense the plunge in temperature. Dien's pupils suddenly contracted as the dark dragon sword in his hand went straight for Yu Hao. The purple-black sword light ripped apart the space between them and left a gaping hole as it went straight for Yu Hao's head. The sword not only contained the power of darkness, but also spatial power. The beast god's power lay in how he was able to combine and fuse both his dark type and spatial powers. At this instant, for unknown reasons, the power he had borrowed from the great Stardow forest had started to recede like the tide. Yu Hao did not try to avoid the sword as he waved the dagger in his hand to block the sword light coming from Dien. This was a power which even Elder Xian could not block directly. A gasp of surprise could be heard from behind Elder Xian. Yang Shaoxia, Xian Lina, and the rest had arrived by his side. They had all been stupefied when they heard Yu Hao challenge Dien. They could not understand what Yu Hao was trying to do. Can he challenge the beast god with the power he possesses? Tling! A bright metallic sound echoed from high up in the sky. An unexpected sight unfolded before everyone's eyes. The black gaping hole in the sky, which was created by Dien, now had a layer of white light on it. All the spatial energy had suddenly been isolated by the white light. It was almost as if the opening was now sealed, and was no longer able to release its energy. Yu Hao was only able to stabilize his body after flying backward for close to 1,000 meters. However, his backward movement had helped him absorb some of the force exerted on him by Dien. On the other hand, Dien's body was now covered in a layer of thick frost. The frost only shattered and fell after he shook his body intensely, and only fully disintegrated after it landed on the ground. Yes, Yu Hao did not gain the upper hand. Compared to Dien, his abilities were still considered relatively undeveloped. However, every observer present placed their hands over their mouths subconsciously. What had they just witnessed? They had just seen a human, who was just a little more than 20 years old, block Dien's blow directly. Dien was frowning as he reflected on the interaction earlier. No one had a deeper impression of the collision than him. Even though the frost on the surface of his body had shattered, he could still feel how retarded the circulation of his blood and soul power had become. This was caused by the extreme temperatures of the frost. He was actually able to seal my spatial energy and inflict his ultimate ice on my body. In the meantime, Yu Hao was not feeling too well after the collision. Purple-black lines were flickering on his body. However, they quickly faded away under the jade-blue light released by the icy war god's armor. No one knew his current state because his body was concealed by the human-shaped soul tool. Yu Hao suddenly vanished after his figure faded away like a mirage. Even the beast god, who had been focusing on Yu Hao, could only sense a slight distortion in the air before losing his target. A worried expression started to form on Dien's face. He had finally concluded that he had underestimated Yu Hao. This young man was a lot more powerful than he had imagined. Yes, he succeeded. That's right. He must have succeeded. If not, there would be no way that he could have blocked my attack without having first attained the ultimate Delure rank. The Yin-Yang complement technique. He was actually able to form his second soul core using the Yin-Yang complement technique with a human body. I can't let this go on. I must stop his development no matter what. If not, it will be impossible to control him in the future. The beast god took a deep breath before raising the dark dragon sword in his hand. Following which, he closed his eyes. He had no intent to kill Yu Hao. However, he had to take him away today and imprison him within the Great Stardow Empire at all costs. The beast god planned to destroy the power which Yu Hao had painstakingly cultivated, and leave him and the power of destiny within the Great Stardow forest forever. When Yu Hao's body reappeared again, he appeared behind Dien. The icy war god's armor instantly released a brilliant jade blue smoke behind it as it sped up and carried Yu Hao forward by nearly 5 kilometers. Yu Hao was getting nearer to the Sun Moon Empire troops. Shit! Juzi exclaimed as she ordered, "All Soul Tool deployment areas, get ready." Yes, she had to ensure her troops were ready for what could happen next. Yu Hao was undoubtedly trying to bring whatever destruction his clash with Dien would create to the Sun Moon Empire military camp instead of Shrek City. The fact that Yu Hao was able to withstand a single blow from Dien meant that he was pretty close to the level of an ultimate dolor, even if he was not quite there yet. If Dien, the current strongest individual in the world, were to clash with him above the Sun Moon Empire's military camp, it would probably bring apocalyptic destruction to the troops and their equipment. Dien seemed to be acting a little strange. He was not going after Yu Hao. Instead, he was just wielding his dark dragon sword with a single hand, and standing there as though he had been frozen. However, Yu Hao was still running. With his cultivation, it only required him to sprint a few moments to cover tens of kilometers. Before long, the Sun Moon Empire's troops were beneath him. Countless virtual images appeared from Yu Hao's body as he disappeared. He only left a distorted glow in his place after his disappearance. He had executed his spiritual interference domain. He wanted to make sure no one beneath him was able to pinpoint his exact location. The Soul Tool deployment areas were unable to attack at this instant. They could only watch as their surveillance Soul Tools tried their best to locate where exactly he was. At this instant, Dien suddenly made his move. His movement was extremely simple and elegant as he flipped in midair before wielding his dark dragon sword with his two hands instead of one. The gigantic sword suddenly released a blinding purple-black sword light in the air. However, the sword light merely appeared for a short while before disappearing. It was strange to see Dien's attack disappear after he seemed to have made an all-out slash in the air. However, the entire sky began to contort and twist as the dense purple-black clouds which were hanging over the land beneath them started to disappear. The sun reappeared and continued its irradiation of sunlight on the land beneath it. However, no one could sense the warmth from its rays. Elder Xian felt as if his heart had skipped a beat at that instant. Dien, who had just completed his slashing motion, seemed to have returned to his formerly calm and collected state. However, he had turned around as he gazed in the direction of the Sun Moon Empire's military camp. Yu Hao reappeared. However, this time around, he was no longer in midair, but on the ground. He was standing inside the Sun Moon Empire's military camp. He was standing there quietly, as though he had sensed something. His hands were wielding the dagger in his hand as he looked around warily. The surrounding soldiers were able to notice his presence instantly. However, no one dared to confront him. In fact, even the surrounding soul engineers did not possess the courage to do so. None of them were foolish enough to believe that they could challenge a person who had just managed to withstand a blow from Dien. The temperature of the air around Yu Hao plunged instantly. Any place within 1,000 meters of him was now permeated with a chilling aura. The entire icy war god's armor which he was wearing had now taken on a jade blue color. The morning dew dagger which was in his hand was now emanating a radiant glow. A chilling current surged within the white icy mist. A figure slowly formed behind Yu Hao. This figure had long golden hair. It was floating behind Yu Hao as it revealed a smile on its face. One of its pupils was black, while the one was white. Yu Hao let out a grunt as he suddenly waved his morning dew dagger upwards. This action was extremely succinct, but it contained a lot of force. In the meantime, Juzi's orders were being disseminated across her army. All Soul Tool deployment areas and linked defensive Soul Tools activate at full power. Do not hold back. The Sun Moon Empire was fortunate to have had their Soul Engineers ready to set up their Soul Tool deployment areas. All of their linked defensive and offensive Soul Tools were already charged and ready for use. Juzi's orders could be implemented right away after they were broadcasted and communicated through sound-amplifying Soul Tools and communication Soul Tools. Several radiant barriers quickly formed above the military camps as they enveloped the large volume of space beneath them. At this instant, an inconspicuous crack suddenly formed in front of Yu Hao. Following which, a purple light flickered from within it. Yu Hao moved his morning dew dagger and managed to block the blow from the purple light. Cling! A bright metallic sound echoed in the air. Yu Hao's body was vibrating intensely, as though he had just been electrocuted. The insane amount of destructive energy spread to every single corner of his body. At that instant, his two yin-yang complement soul cores seemed to have stopped working. In fact, Yu Hao found himself incapable of thinking. The morning dew dagger released a bright humming sound as its blade began to tremble. In fact, it was trembling so fast that it appeared to be in possession of multiple blades. Multiple deep blue whirlpools began to form on the icy war god's armor. The ground beneath Yu Hao started to vibrate as those whirlpools started to fall to the ground from Yu Hao's armor. After landing on the ground, those whirlpools began to expand furiously. At the same time, Yu Hao felt as though everything inside him had stopped. Following which, he could sense the frightening power being channeled into his body by the dark dragon sword tearing up everything within him. This sensation felt horrible. In fact, it was unbelievably frightening. Two figures started to appear behind him. Those two figures looked very similar to the ones which had formed behind Dien earlier. They were also a sun and a moon. However, while Dien had a black sun and a purple moon, Yu Hao's sun was golden, and his moon was a brilliant blue. After they appeared, a mystical energy started to appear in his body. This energy was like a powerful glue which recombined the parts of his body that had been shredded by Dien's attack. Dien was observing all of this from afar. Previously, he had only guessed that Yu Hao had successfully formed his second soul core with the yin-yang complement technique. Now, he was certain that Yu Hao had managed to pull it off. The mystical appearance of a sun and a moon was the signature of the yin-yang complement technique. He has actually managed to cultivate his second soul core using the yin-yang complement technique. He has managed to accomplish a feat which no human has ever done. Even Dien was starting to fear the potential that Yu Hao was displaying. This young man is growing too quickly. Even though Dien did not believe Yu Hao could form his third soul core to become an ultimate Dolor, he was still a little wary of the power and potential he was exhibiting. Dien believed that he must not be given the room and time to become even more powerful. Just when Dien was thinking about what to do with him, a horrifying change was underway in the Sun Moon Empire's military camp. The little whirlpools which had landed on the ground from Yu Hao's body had transformed into humongous hurricanes which were sweeping across the land beneath them and destroying anything in their way. These hurricanes were all dark blue. To be precise, their colors were a combination of black and blue. They contained both Yu Hao's ultimate ice and Dien's dark-type energy. They essentially dark and ice hurricanes of sorts. Yu Hao and Dien's clash had inflicted horrifying destruction to their surroundings. The tents which were within 1,000 meters from Yu Hao had all turned a dark blue color before disintegrating into powder. Nothing within them was spared a similar fate. The Sun Moon Empire's military camp was actually designed with several considerations in mind. Every camp surrounded a single soul tool deployment area. The soul tool deployment area would then be able to activate its linked defensive soul tools to protect the camp when they were attacked by their enemies. When the multiple dark blue hurricanes began to expand, they were already almost touching the linked defensive barriers. The 4 nearest linked defensive barriers turned dark blue within a few seconds. Even though they did not disintegrate instantly like the tents, the linked defensive barriers began to consume an insane amount of energy. Every soul engineer within these soul tool deployment areas was frantically trying to inject soul power into their various soul tools. They were very well aware that they would have no chance of surviving if they were to allow the dark blue hurricane to sweep into the soul deployment area. Yu Hao paused for a little more than 10 seconds before he regained his ability to move. Even though his body was a little shaky, he was still able to stand up and stabilize himself immediately. When he looked up at Dien in the sky again, his eyes reflected the fear in his heart. After this recent breakthrough, he now possessed his second soul core. He could sense from his own soul power that he was definitely stronger than someone who had just become a titled Dolor. He believed he was somewhere between rank 92 and 93. In addition, his soul power had undergone a transformative change because his second soul core was formed from the yin-yang complement technique. Every single strand of soul power had been compressed, and his ultimate ice and spiritual power were now perfectly fused. His martial souls were no longer individual and could fuse perfectly without any deliberate control. Yu Hao believed his power now exceeded that of any normal transcendent Dalur. At the same time, one must remember the icy war god's armor on his body. The boost given to him by the world's strongest human-shaped soul tool was immense. After this breakthrough, he was finally able to fully control the capabilities of the icy war god's armor, as well as some of the capabilities of the Morning Dew dagger. These were the reasons why he was confident of challenging Dien. However, it was only after clashing with Dien head-on that Yu Hao fully understood why Dien was called the strongest individual in the world. His strength and abilities were still way above his expectations. Just that previous blow alone was sufficient to make Yu Hao realize how he had underestimated Dien's power. If Dien were to have followed up that blow and pursued him, Yu Hao would have been dead by now. Of course, Elder Xian, who was watching vigilantly by the side, would never allow Dien to take action against Yu Hao. However, this was enough to show the enormous gap between his and Dien's abilities. He should be proud of his feat of blocking Dien's blow at his current tender age. However, it was still not enough in Yu Hao's opinion. It was still a long way off from what he had expected from himself. Yu Hao kept his gaze on Dien as he panted lightly. He slowly raised the Morning Dew dagger in his hand as he channeled the soul power in his body into the dagger continuously. Following which, he circulated the same soul power back into his body as every bit of cold elemental energy was absorbed into his body. Even though he did not have the help of his spirits, the Morning Dew dagger was able to make up for it. It was only after he had truly experienced its might that Yu Hao finally knew how powerful the dagger was. If he did not have the Morning Dew dagger and the icy war god's armor, which together had negated close to 70% of Dien's blow, he would have died there and then. How could Yu Hao have taken Dien's frightening blow, which was infused with darkness and spatial energy, on his own? Boom! Boom! Two linked defensive barriers shattered at the same time. Following which, everything within the soul tool deployment areas was enveloped by the dark blue hurricanes. It was important to note that there were 50,000 soldiers within each of the soul tool deployment areas. In addition, there were several precious soul tools and soul engineers inside as well. However, their other protective soul barriers managed to withstand the hurricanes as the remaining dark blue hurricanes slowly faded away. Yu Hao was confused as to why Dien did not continue attacking him. Suddenly, a mystical power suddenly emerged within the Sun Moon Empire's military camp. It was a dark red light which was extremely slim, yet very long. It suddenly appeared after the two soul tool deployment areas were destroyed. After appearing in mid-air, it stopped right above the two soul tool deployment areas. Following which, countless enraged and extremely fearful avenging spirits started to gravitate rapidly to the dark red light. The dark red light was expanding at an incredible speed before it formed a long spear in mid-air. Huh? Dien was a little startled as he stared at the dark red spear warily. Yu Hao was also looking at that long spear. He was naturally able to sense that it was aimed at Dien with his superior spiritual detection ability. At the same time, Juzi, who was hiding in the core area of the camp, ordered coldly, "Fire Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion, get ready. Fire. Concentrate your firepower on Dien." Streaks of light started to rise from the Sun Moon Empire's military camp as they transformed into a beam of the purest red light, which surged towards Dien, who was hovering in mid-air. The reaction from the Sun Moon Empire shocked the powerful cultivators from Shrek Academy. They would never have expected the Sun Moon Empire's Soul Engineer Legion to attack Dien. Isn't that the same as seeking one's own death? Unless the Sun Moon Empire is able to recognize the need for humans to unite against soul beasts. That can't be it. That is not something the Sun Moon Empire would do. Of course, that was impossible. Right from the beginning, Juzi had been trying to get Zhongli to attack Dien. Now, she was also commanding the Soul Engineer Legions to strike Dien. There was only one reason for her decisions. She wanted to help Yu Hao. Juzi had never planned to attack Shrek Academy. After Yu Hao had returned her son to her, revenge was no longer the most important thing in this world. In her eyes, the most important things for her were the two men in her life. One of them was Xu Yunhan, while the other one was naturally. Hence, Juzi had already made up her mind the moment where Yu Hao suddenly appeared on the battlefield. She was initially not planning to make a move. After all, it was best for Dien and the Holy Ghost Church to be engaged in a mutually disadvantageous battle. However, she could not care anymore after seeing how Dien slashed his sword at Yu Hao. When she saw that, she felt as if her heart had almost stopped. That sensation was simply unbearable. Thus, she did not hesitate to order her troops to attack Dien. She simply could not afford to allow Dien to attack Yu Hao again. Of course, there was no one present here who could understand her true intentions. Even Yu Hao, who was involved in this whole saga, could not tell why she was making these decisions. After all, no one would have expected the Sun Moon Empire's commander to make her decisions based on her feelings for a single man. Besides, Juzi's orders had been given at an extremely timely moment. She issued the orders precisely when Zhongli Wu first made his move. This seemed more like a combined effort with the Holy Ghost Church rather than a selfish decision. Hence, no one would challenge her decision. The reason why Dien did not continue to attack Yu Hao was because Elder Xian was watching vigilantly by the side. On top of that, he was a little lost right now. He did not know what he should do to Yu Hao. While he was aware that he must not kill him, he was also aware that catching him would be extremely challenging. The presence of the powerful soul masters from the Shrek Academy was bound to make things difficult for him. On top of that, Yu Hao had already acquired his second soul core using the yin-yang complement technique. If he were unable to put up a fight, he would definitely be able to flee successfully. Dien was not confident of abducting Yu Hao when he was also up against the powerful cultivators from Shrek Academy and Elder Xian, an ultimate Dalur. Just when he was hesitating, the attacks from the Sun Moon Empire's soul tools reached him. Dien let out a cold grunt as he waved his humongous hand in front of him. Instantly, a black light formed before him. The black light was like an expanded dragon scale with pointed edges. It floated before Dien as it attempted to block the linked offensive soul tool attacks coming towards him. However, it was only able to block the soul tools for a short instant. The pitch-black scale seemed to pause for a while as a look of surprise flickered across Dien's usually calm face. Following which, he instantly vanished from where he was. More than 10 streaks of light shot through the black scale and tore the void behind him to shreds. Dien reappeared a couple of 100 meters from where he had been. A frustrated expression had replaced the shocked look on his face. He could not imagine how these humans were able to become so powerful. The power of the humans' attacks had already exceeded his expectations. What exactly was that power? The total energy stored in the attack had already exceeded the power he had. It was simply too frightening for him. Was it possible for humans or a group of soul masters to collectively produce such power? Back when he launched the beast wave against Shrek City, Dien had witnessed the destructive ability of soul tools. Even though he had been wary then, those soul tools were not as powerful as the ones he was witnessing now. However, it was very different now. These soul tools were clearly able to threaten him. This was a frightening prospect for him to fathom. The existence of such weapons meant that the Great Star Doe Forest could be in danger at any moment. The beams from the linked offensive soul tools did not disappear after penetrating Dien's black scale. Instead, they swept horizontally as they tried to chase after him. This was an opportunity that Yu Hao would definitely seize. Of course, he did not intend to attack Dien. He was going to flee. In a flicker, he concealed himself within the air as he sped out of the range of the Sun Moon Empire's military camp. At the same time, he used his spiritual power to contact the people from Shrek Academy. Through his spiritual detection sharing ability, he was able to direct everyone back to Shrek City. Yu Hao was already very satisfied to have destroyed 2 soul tool deployment areas with Dien's help. This was effectively equivalent to 1/10 of the entire Sun Moon Empire's troops. In addition, it was good that Dien was now fighting the Sun Moon Empire. Such battles were better viewed from afar. The destructive ability of the linked offensive soul tools was simply overwhelming. Dien might be fine if he were only hit once. However, if all of them were to land on his body, Even he might not be able to take it. This video will end here.